I was a U.S. Army tanker, and we were invading Iraq. Okay, I was assigned to a unit that was a special task force that was assigned to go into northern Iraq, initially from Turkey, which was undergoing their trial by fire to get into the European Union. So there's a lot of political stuff going on in Turkey at that time, and we were to be the opening up of a northern front in the campaign against Saddam Hussein's Iraq. So what happened was, I'm sitting there watching Fox News, waiting to go. We called it Groundhog Day. And I was there waiting to go, and I'm watching the news, waiting for our orders, and I'm seeing this correspondent or this reporter talk about my unit going into northern Iraq in support of another unit, which was the plan. And he's telling our little secret on a news network, on Fox News. And he's like pretty much letting the beans out, spilling the beans, loose lips sink ships. You think that was an accident? No. It was meant to be disclosed so that forces would be diverted from the southern offensive to the northern offensive, and weaken the southern defenses, so that the main push north from Kuwait could happen. And that's exactly what happened. I was like, what's going on? At that time, I was like, man, this is ridiculous. What's going on here? You know, I understood the need for OPSEC, or operational security. Well, they meant to let it all out. They meant to tell it. And it's in the history books. It's in Task Force 163, Operation Airborne Dragon. It was a groundbreaking experience. In that is the first time in history they put tanks on airplanes and flew them into combat, just as they did in World War II's, rolling them off of ships onto a beachhead. And that was part of the grand scheme of things that Dean was talking about to affect the price of oil in the world. That happened in 2003, 2005, 2006. You remember the big gas prices they hiked, right? What was going on at that time? Well, Georgia in Europe, not the state of Georgia here in the United States, but Soviet Georgia, former state of Soviet Georgia. There was a war going on, a revolution. They're an oil-producing country. Prices of oil shot up 2006. 2008, what else happened? I was in Iraq fighting a war, again. But in 2008, savings and loan, home, mortgage, everybody went belly up. They started going crazy with mismanaging our money and lending and all that stuff. And I was over there working with the Iraqi people. This time as an advisor. I was sent there in 2003 to fight an enemy, and I went back in 2007 to help our allies form a new government, a democratic government. And I apologize for sitting down, but I have some stuff going on. Kundalini syndrome in my left leg, my root chakra. So I'm in pain, unfortunately. Even us light workers, we suffer from certain ailments. It's part of the spiritual maturity process, spiritual awakening. And that's what I want to get to right now, is that Dean talked about the three-dimensional aspect of what's going on, as far as the physical realm and what we're doing right now in the physical realm. And I want to talk to you a little bit about what that means for us in the long-term, big picture, true nature, of our true selves, the spiritual realm. And actually, there's a pattern that goes along with that we see it all the time. Come on in if you're interested. Sometimes the truth does hurt. So here's the deal. All right, where science proves this, there's two things. There's science and there's spiritual beliefs, and there's religion, which is a dogmatic explanation of phenomena, and but it's all the same story. It's all the same story, and it's the path to enlightenment. Joseph Campbell called it the hero's journey in his book, The Hero of a Thousand Faces. And so we have what's called we call the blueprint. I call it the blueprint to the path to enlightenment. And it's the hero's journey. We see it in mythology, the story of Hercules. We see it in fairy tales. We see it in our ascended masters, such as Sakyamuni Buddha, the first Buddha, and the Lord Jesus Christ, following that path of ascension. And then also modern day examples of people who, like Mother Teresa, for instance, or Mahatma Gandhi, people who, or even His Holiness the Dalai Lama, people who have transcended the material world and this need for things and have embraced their divine feminine and, and coming from a place of love and compassion. And we see that in people of prominence, world-known figures, and then we see it in people today who live an aesthetic lifestyle, or what we're looking at in the green movement. How many of you have heard of Earthship homes? Anyone? No? They're amazing. Earthship.com, check them out. This is the wave of the future. Going back to nature. So, bridging the gap between science and religion. Now, for years and years and years, people have been talking about creationism versus evolution. What if I told you there's no difference? What if I said that there is science to support the religion? What if I told you that things are actually coming together, and what used to be an empty argument on either side is now actually mutually supported by either side, by both sides? In other words, the science supports the idea that there is an intelligent design out there, and things have been manifested through a conscious effort. What we're seeing is a conscious effort of an intelligence. And there's intelligence on every level. So whether you call it a higher level of consciousness, or you call it a higher power, or whether you call it God, or the Creator, or the evolutionary process, it's all the same. It's all semantic. And it just depends on what school of thought you feel most comfortable with. But the bottom line is this. I'll give you an example. The moon. We just had a lunar eclipse on Monday night, Tuesday morning. And the moon happens to be so many times smaller than the Earth, and so many times smaller than the sun. And it just so happens that it is so many times away from the sun and away from the Earth, to where we're going to have a solar eclipse coming up. Now what happens is, when the solar eclipse happens, we're going to be able to see, well, let me go back. The lunar eclipse. The Earth, its shadow covered the moon in its entirety. And it worked out perfectly, didn't it? Covered it all up. Just so happens that we're just the right size and just the right distance for that to happen perfectly. Now here's what happens when we do a lunar eclipse, or a solar eclipse. So the moon blocks out the sun. Wow. Now what happens is, with astronomers, people who study space and the universe and that sort of phenomenon, they were able to look at the corona around the moon during a solar eclipse, and through spectral analysis, in other words, by looking at the different colors of it, determine the gaseous content of the sun, knowing that it's helium and hydrogen. And by understanding that helium and hydrogen burn at a certain temperature and therefore create a certain color, they were able to determine, based off of our sun, the life cycle and gaseous content of other stars in the galaxy. That's like a breadcrumb of knowledge. Now that's just one part. Now how is that possible for us to be able to be open to that kind of information? And how is that possible for this phenomenon, this natural phenomenon, to work out so perfectly to lead us on this journey of knowledge? Is that random? Or is it by intelligent design? Which leads me to the relevance of all things. If the universe is the sum of all its parts, wouldn't you say that you, each one of us, is the sum of all our parts? That means if I am a single living person, a single human being, I have trillions of cells which make up my physical body. And I am the sum of all of my parts. And of those trillions of cells, they make up different tissues, which make up different organs. And they all are unique, or not, depending on what kind of cell they are. And so therefore, there are smaller communities within a greater community, which is my body. And they each have their own frequency, because they have to operate at a certain level. And they all respond to different things based off of how our bodies work, as far as our endocrine system and hormones and thoughts and feelings. So a feeling is the result of a thought. And a thought is the result of a stimulus. And then it's based on a previous experience. And then what it does is it generates an electrical impulse to the endocrine system, which then receives this information and then turns it into a hormonal response, which causes the body to respond in a physical chemical way. So we have energy, which is the genesis of all things, followed by the material, which is the chemical and cellular level. So it's all relevant. So I don't know about you, but I was climbing up the walls Monday night during that lunar eclipse. And then on Tuesday morning, throughout the week, I really needed to rest because there was this tremendous shift. It was almost like a hormonal shift as a result of astrological or astronomical phenomena. So there's the relevance of all things. So I want to encourage you to look at things at all levels of reality. So from the consciousness, like for instance, going back to that small scale on the cellular reality, your immune system uses intelligence to determine whether or not you have a pathogen or a foreign substance in your body that doesn't belong there. And it uses it by checking the protein of every cell that it comes across. It says, do you have that protein? Yes? Okay, you belong here. Do you have a protein? Oh no. Okay, now we need to release white blood cells. We need to attack this pathogen. That's our immune system. It does it on a cellular level. So those cells have an intelligence. They have a consciousness. And it goes even further. What tells those cells, which are made up of molecules, which are made up of atoms, how does that work? It's not the atoms, it's not the molecules. It's the consciousness that binds them together. Just as it was consciousness that brought us here together to this one space today. So it's relative, just as the planets are part of something greater. So if we are the sum of all of our parts, then the planet is a living organism in the sum of all of its parts. And it has a consciousness. And every time there's a natural disaster, I was thinking about this on my way here this morning, every time there's a natural disaster, I'll give you an example, a couple of examples. During the Second World War, Admiral Halsey's fleet out in the Pacific experienced a tremendous tsunami hurricane. It was called, and it really wreaked a tremendous blow on the American fleet out in the Pacific during the Second World War. A few days, about a week after the Normandy invasion in 1944, there's a huge storm that hit the Normandy coast. Again, slamming the Allies. In Italy, when we were fighting in Italy, and we fought in Italy from 1943 until the Germans surrendered and end of hostilities in Europe. Mount Vesuvius erupted, covering towns in Italy with volcanic dust. What was going on at that time? We were having a world war. Mankind was on a rampage, destroying, bombing, polluting the oceans. Every time a German U-boat sunk an Allied cargo ship or a tanker full of oil, it was, we're talking the Exxon Valdez, more like Mr. Universe. If Pee Wee Herman was Exxon Valdez, then World War II was Mr. Universe. That's the tremendous amount of environmental impact warfare has on our planet. Some of you may be more familiar with Vietnam and the bombing of the jungles in Vietnam, and how that has an effect on global warming, or the deforestation of South America with logging, and how that has had an effect. Again, we are attacking the body. We are some of all of our parts, and we're attacking the body. And then what happens is the body, which is our planet, reacts to that. It's a conscious thing. There's a consciousness about it. But what's happening now is the immune system in the planet is recovering. And that's what we're seeing with this awakening of consciousness. That's why you're here today. That's why we're having this expo today. So there's the relevance of all things. We're all connected. What happens on the other side of the world affects us directly. So that's saying, what does this have to do with the price of tea in China? I say everything. Planetary ecosystem, universal ecosystem, interdependence of all things. I just went over that. Now, there's the message. The hero's journey. Remember I spoke about the hero's journey? The bearing of the cross. the crucifixion and the resurrection. The story of Dorothy, who had to get back to Kansas, had to find her way to the wizard. And then she had to go and take on the Wicked Witch of the West. So she had a cross to bear. And she had to deal with that. And then what did she find out? Oh, you had it in you the whole time. She transcended it all. And her going back home to Kansas was her ascension. Star Wars, big thing right now with Star Wars Episode 7 coming out. A lot of talk about that. Again, we see the farm boy, the unassuming hero, with his band of misfit characters. It's the same story. Luke, you must leave this place and follow me and learn to become a Jedi, said Obi-Wan. Learn the ways of the Force. In other words, enter into a spiritual journey. Transcend your fears. Vanquish the evil, which is really the ego. And ascend. Be at peace. Find that place of serenity within yourself. That's the hero's journey. And then you share it. You become the teacher then. You share your wisdom. You share your experience. You share your hope. And you enlighten others. Just as Sakyamuni Buddha did. Just as Jesus did. They had an understanding. Just as Dr. Martin Luther King understood. And Mahatma Gandhi did. And so how does this play out? It's the same story as been told many, many, many times before. The story of Hercules, the story of the Wizard of Oz, Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, they wrote their own mythologies. They said, we need to give the world some new fairy tales, some new stories. But it's all the same journey. It all has relevance. And what does it tell us? It tells us that we are all on the same path. Why do these stories have relevance? Why do they appeal to us? Because we're going through the same process. We are walking the same path. We are all the hero in our own lives. We all have our own crosses to bear, and we all must transcend in order to ascend. And that's what's happening right now with the consciousness of this planet. That's what's happening right now with this Cardinal Grand Cross, which is occurring at this very moment. It's opening the gates for that process to occur. It's shifting the energies, which again is relative and relevant everywhere and with everything. And it's moving us into a position to where the earth can reclaim itself through using us as its custodians to give back to it. And how do we do that? How do we go back that? Well, imagination is based on reality. So we have all kinds of help. How do we know that imagination is based on reality? Well, I told you when I walked in here that I work with angels, right? Angels are written in the mythologies of several different religions. They're talked about in many different stories. They're talked about in lots and lots of stories. It's a Wonderful Life, Clarence, the guardian angel, right? So that's a story. That's a mythology. Look, Papa, every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings. That came out of someone's imagination, but it's based on reality. Because nothing unreal can be imagined. Angels exist. Angels, higher dimensional beings, multidimensional beings, space odysseys, Star Wars, other planets, close encounters of the third kind, and gods. Who was it that appeared to Ezekiel? Was that an angel or an alien? Doesn't matter. Because it goes back to, again, the semantics of explaining our reality and our creation, our existence. It could be yes, yes, and yes. A scientist may say, or a quantum physicist may say, no, that was an extraterrestrial or multi-dimensional being that appeared to Ezekiel and gave him divine instruction. Or was it Archangel Gabriel that came and said, Joseph, take you and your family and go to Bethlehem to give birth to this child? Or was that an alien? It's a matter of perspective and school of thought. So we're taught. So the idea then is to take all this information and open yourself up to integration, to the possibility. Because for too long we've been limited. And Dean had mentioned that in his talk about how the system, which was limiting, had taken us away from this reality. It's all about nickels and dimes and petrodollars. Now it's about feeling your feelings. Now it's about coming to understand what your reality is, your truth is, which is different for each and every one of us, but the same in many ways. So, fairies, angels, multidimensional beings, they're all out there. They're all part of who we are. We're all family. Now, here's where it comes to us, each and every one of us, and our personal responsibility and accountability. We are part of the greater whole. We are a cell in a tissue, which is part of an organ, which is part of a living organism. And it's up to each and every one of our cells in our bodies to keep our bodies going. That's our vehicle. And so it's our attitude that makes the day. It's our attitude and how we operate on a daily basis which affect how we go about the caretaking of our planet and of our lives. And that requires applying the knowledge of the ascended masters, these mythologies, these stories, these heroes. Applying the information and wisdom that we got from our own journey. We're each at a different stage in our lives. We've each had experiences. And I want to share something with you about the illusion of duality. So we've all had, say, good experiences and bad experiences. We've all laughed, we've all cried, we've all felt joy, we've all felt pain, we've all felt fear. Well, I went to school and I had exams, I had tests, and I can't remember a single evil, malicious quiz or exam. Can any of you? So in other words, these things, these experiences, the sole purpose of experience is to provide opportunities for spiritual growth. Now I want to emphasize the word opportunities, because sometimes we have these experiences over and over and over and over and over and over again. I had to take algebra 3 times in college.
Oh, Lord.
I needed to have that experience. I had to change my attitude from it being a horrible experience, some evil, malicious thing, to just an experience to allow me to grow. And that's what happens in our lives. It's about the process of spiritual growth. So it's about opportunity and embracing it, embracing that tiger. It's about being open to the experience, because you're going to learn, you're going to grow from it. That's the benefit of it, and that's why we're here in this physical manifestation. To understand that what's really going on is that there's something bigger happening here. What Dean alluded to was the time cycle involved, and it goes greater than a single lifetime. It goes lifetimes. 1878, we had a tremendous, great leap forward. Pardon me for using a Maoist term, but that's what it was. And that's happening right now. We're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years. You know, I was thinking about this going back to Iraq. It's been 11 years now. In April of 2003, I went into Iraq, and it's April of 2014. Over a decade ago, I went and made my first trip there. And here I am today. Wow. A lot has happened since then. But it seems like a blink of an eye. So, applying this knowledge and tapping into the wisdom of the ages, these myths, these legends, these fairy tales, our religious beliefs, the stories, those who inspire us, the great heroes of our modern age, whether it be the quarterback of the 49ers, or somebody who transcended an illness through laughter and good health. They made a lifestyle change to getting on the treadmill, to making a lifestyle change and not eating meat, which is, it's been almost a year now. I haven't had any meat for almost a year, and it's really helped me in my spiritual growth. That's been my journey. And applying these principles in our own daily life to raise our own consciousness, to applying compassion, healing, and understanding to ourselves and others, to understand that we are all in this journey together. So seeking first to understand first yourself, and apply those principles which we are told so many times, or we're bombarded with for other people. Oh, give them a break. Give yourself a break. Oh, everybody's going through tough stuff. You're going through tough stuff. Cut yourself a break. Give yourself some of that love. Oh, I'm such a giver. I do so much for everyone else. Do for yourself. You see, the tree grows tall for its own sake, because that's what it is willed to do. It stretches out its branches to gather more sunlight and more water. Not for the birds who nest in it, or the insects who take refuge in its shade or on its branches, but for itself. But in turn, being of service to itself, it is of service to the creatures that live under it, in it, around it. It offers shade, it offers shelter, it offers stability to the soil, and then, in its dying, it gives back to that which served it. And that's what it's all about. It's about being of service. Service to self, and through service to self, service to others. So how do we do that? We do that through healing. We do that through working past the illusion of the five senses. Getting out of the material and into the ethereal. Getting out of the eyes, ears, nose, mouth, hands, and into your heart. Getting back into the right side of our brain, which is really the whole of ourself, the whole of our brain. Getting to healing. Healing ourselves so that we can be of service to others. Because what's been happening is it's been the sickness of consciousness, the lack of awareness and the lack of understanding, the ignorance of self, which has led us to this point to where we're dependent on things and not on each other. Thank you very much for being here. I'm very, very blessed to have you on my company today.
Thank you, David.
That was very nice, David.
Thank you. You ready?